Hello, welcome. This is Hatem Alakeel from GemsOfArabia. It's an honor to be in the studio. Thank you, Becky and CNN team, for including us today. Today we have the honor of being able to discuss very important topics that are quite close to my heart. It's like representation of the Arab in the region. Are Arabs really able to voice their opinions globally? Have the representation really reached the point where we can say that now local media is recognized internationally? So with us today we have Becky Anderson, world-renowned journalist, news anchor for CNN. Thank you for having us here.
More than welcome.
World-renowned journalist as well, Faisal Abbas, who really kind of pioneered the evolution of Arab media when it comes to 2016. You started right after 2030. You started your role at Arab News, so that kind of explains it even more detail. Malak Fouad, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Owner of A&T Media and podcaster extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Thank you for also having me on your wonderful podcast.
It was wonderful having you.
And thank you for coming all the way from Egypt.
Thank you.
Starting with Becky, what is your opinion of the evolution of the Arab media locally, especially someone who's been here, who kind of set base Abu Dhabi, CNN?
Well, look, I've got three great examples of the evolution of and the brilliance of what we are seeing in this region just here in the studio, and it's wonderful to have you. Thank you for taking over my studio today for what should be a very rich conversation. I arrived here in 2014 to Abu Dhabi with the show Connect the World with Becky Anderson. I'm the managing editor here in Abu Dhabi for the Gulf region for CNN. I've been coming in and out of the region for years before I decided to come, but the point of coming here was to bring the show, which is a 2-hour show. That's a lot of real estate in terms of international programming. I wanted this region to be revealed. I didn't think that the international media were doing a good enough job in really sort of lifting the lid on the region, a region that is navigating a new Middle East. And I wanted to get a sense on and from the region. So we brought a small team from London and built up a team of local talent here, which I'm very, very proud of. And at the same time, here, 4 years ago, we've launched the CNN Academy Abu Dhabi, which is all about empowering young talent to equip them with the skills of storytelling and journalism. So over the more than a decade that we've been here now, both through news and features editorial, I think we are, I hope, embedded in revealing the region, knocking back some of the misperceptions about the region, introducing the region across both news, arts, culture, entertainment, sport, everything. This is a really vibrant region, and it needs to. We need to ensure that we are better telling the story.
Tip of the iceberg. I mean, there's so much potential.
Absolutely.
Incredible opportunities. Speaking of transformation, Faisal, the evolution of Arab news over the years, especially digitally, do you think that we are able to reach our goals as Arabs in general, being able to reach that kind of international recognition?
Well, first of all, Hatem, thank you for having us on your show. And if anybody gives us a cue on international recognition, it's the work that you do.
You're very kind.
I want to pick up where Becky, our good colleague Becky, has ended, and it's a very important piece. I want to put this into context. What used to happen before great journalists like Becky and great institutions like CNN decided to set up shop here is you would have the foreign correspondent come from London or come from the US for a few days, pretty much with preconceived ideas, and just produce stories that would reinforce these ideas without any depth or without any insight. Of course, many of them got it right, but a lot got it wrong. So I just want to re-emphasize before I talk about the work that we do in Arab News and how it complements the work that Becky does. It is very important. In fact, I think one of CNN's many slogans was, "Go there." It's very important for journalists to go there. So I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have international journalists of the caliber of Becky here in the region. And hats off to the United Arab Emirates for being pioneers in realizing this and establishing the infrastructure to have international broadcasters here. I think Saudi Arabia is catching up very quickly with the regulations changing and the new laws allowing for permits for international journalists to visit and set up base in Saudi Arabia. We will soon resolve that part of the puzzle in Saudi Arabia. Now, the other part of the narrative challenge is us telling our own stories. Prior to 2016, I would say, not just because of what the work I'm doing at Arab News, not just because of the launch of Vision 2030, which I'm very proud to be reporting on. I think we all started realizing in the aftermath of 9/11 that we have a huge problem in negative stereotyping. In fact, the late Professor Jack Shaheen, in his very famous book, Real Bad Arabs, realized that over 100 years, in 1,000 movies, over 900 had negative or inaccurate representation of Arabs. Now, I am not saying there's a conspiracy. I'm not saying that there's somebody out to get Arabs. I'm quite sure if you do the same research about Chinese or Russian or other ethnicities, you will find negative stereotypes.
Started since the 18th century, I believe.
Yes, well, indeed. But, you have two choices, really. You could curse the darkness, or you could choose to light a candle.
Yeah.
What we chose to do in Arab News is to light a candle, and we take on the challenge, not by propaganda, not by lying to people, by trying to replicate the international standards in journalism to as much as we can within our abilities, within our current regulations, and hopefully with the changes that we are seeing in Saudi Arabia and the new elected board of the Saudi Journalist Association, we will be able to change the current status and hopefully be at par with the likes of CNN and others.
There's a lot of work to be done, but as someone who's also in media myself, I noticed that there is a thirst for credibility, for authenticity. Malak, how do you feel you can still remain authentic to your values, but also remain globally relevant? Because there's certain topics that resonate locally.
Of course.
And others that you,
Well, from my perspective, I started this podcast 4 years ago. And the idea was always to bridge cultures. So that was always part of the equation for me when I was developing the concept for the show. We look at people's pivot points in life, but we are very much a show that is from the region, for the region. It could be an Arab voice, but it could also be a Western voice who happens to live in the region. We had Becky on the show.
I love that. I love that podcast.
and
It's such,
thank you.
It resonates so well.
Yeah, and I think it works because, you could be living anywhere in the world and you can tune in, and these are people's stories. So you're going to find resonance with it. You're going to find a point in anyone's story that you can connect to. And that's the bottom line.
you dig deep.
Yeah, you dig deep, but I think also fundamentally, one thing that I wanted to highlight is, we're talking about our region as being separate or different, but fundamentally, it's just an amalgam of stories. We're all the same, deep down. We all have the same problems. We all have the same challenges. We all have the same ambitions. We're just dealing with circumstances that might be slightly different. And when you look at it from that perspective, I think it changes how you approach the question, I feel. For me, I also feel that the Arab world, and I know that this was very much the sort of the anchor of our discussion today, the Arab world for me is not a monolith. It's not a block. So if, like in this region, you're all based in this region, your perspective is Gulf-centric, Saudi-centric, and you see the region from that point. I'm based in Egypt. I see it slightly differently. If you're based in Morocco, you see it completely differently. Your axis is towards France. So, we can't talk as though we are in one entity. So if we look at it from that point of view, then you just drill down into individual stories. So that's how I approach it more.
And I think, let me just pick up there, because one of the other tools, if you want to call it that I have with my show on CNN is to ensure not just that I've got people from the region producing the show, not just that we have the Academy students who we are empowering with the skills of storytelling and journalism to tell their own stories from this region, but it's about who we put on that show.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important, because whether we're talking about Gaza or Lebanon, whether we're talking about e-gaming in Saudi, whether we're talking about tourism in Egypt, I need to ensure that those who are providing the analysis and insight on these stories about this region are from the region and understand the region. I can put an analyst or a commentator on from Washington, that's fine. That's a perspective from Washington. If I put a Saudi or Lebanese commentator on who happens to be resident in Washington, works for the Middle East Institute, for example, that's better.
Yeah,
so it's really, really
More
important.
credibility, of course.
Of course.
Absolutely.
But it's not just about the credibility. That's hugely important. It goes beyond that. It's just right. It's just right
It is,
that we do that,
But I
because that
also
will
think,
help us just...
Absolutely. I also feel that we are now, we used to take our cues from the West, right? We would assume that anything that came from abroad was best. That's not the case anymore. And we can discuss why that is. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why that's changed. But fundamentally, we are empowered to tell our own stories now. Whether it's you on your show, whether it's Arab News, and Becky's perspective as well is very valid and very important. And the nurturing of local talent is vital. If we are to have resonance around the world, it has to come from us.
Speaking of which, nurturing of locals with the CNN Academy, I see quite some very...
hello
the
guys.
The
So
future
I've got
here.
my back to you.
Hello,
and
everyone.
our students here. But the CNN Academy, we seeded the idea here. Ali Reza Haji Hosseini is my colleague here. And between us about 5 years ago, we realised it was really, really important that we could provide a skill set in storytelling and journalism to youngsters locally. We've been doing work experience. We've been doing summer camps for little girls and boys.
Starting early, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And we've been doing sort of internships, but we wanted to put a wrap around this. Yeah. And so 4 years ago, we launched the CNN Academy Abu Dhabi. So this was seeded here in Abu Dhabi, well supported locally. And what we wanted to do was get young residents and Emiratis, UAE residents and Emiratis, into CNN and getting a thoroughly good understanding of, verification tools, everything that you need as a journalist, and, the skill set you need to connect with an audience and land your message. And so this is, and you see this through the lens of news, you see this through the lens of sort of feature programming, you see it through whatever the lens is, whatever the news is that you want to land with an audience, CNN has a toolkit to help you out. So the idea is that the students join us in September. We've got 45 students this year in Academy for a 12-week program. There's a CNN Hub, so that's the online tool that they get to really do a deep dive, introduced to my colleagues around the world who will, from writing scripts to digital video to, what a social media video looks like.
Sorry.
It's a very competitive process. It runs for about 2 or 3 months over the summer period. We get an awful lot of applicants. So those who are in this
you guys are not messing
have done
around,
extremely well. So those 45 go through a 12-week program during which we have masterclasses. This term, the theme for this year is storytelling in an era of AI. So the masterclasses not only give you a sense of, disinformation, fake news, everything that a journalist or young storyteller needs to be aware of in an era of AI, but the masterclasses are also with experts in the field of AI. And we're very lucky here in Abu Dhabi. This is a sort of global hub, an emerging global hub for AI and advanced technology. So we're taking advantage of the expert talent that we have in this region. So the masterclasses sort of provide an extra layer. At the end of this, we run a simulation, which is best in class. I don't see this anywhere else in the world, where we bring in students from around the world. And to your point, that means this year, for example, we've got, I think, 40 students coming in from the States, from the University of Florida, from Georgia Tech, from various other universities in the States, and students from Malaysia, Hong Kong. And then I've got about 150 students coming in for this simulation. So we effect a sort of breaking news environment, which has got an AI theme this year, and we create our own social media for that. And the idea is that all of those students who've been through Academy get a sense of how to use that toolkit in a safe to fail but breaking news environment. So everything they've learned, they then get an opportunity to really exercise in real time.
And eventually possibly work with
Absolutely.
CNN as well.
So that's the idea. That's the idea. We've got students who've come out of the Academy program who are not just interns here and now getting jobs here, let me tell you, in Abu Dhabi, but in London and in the States and indeed in Hong Kong. So, you know, this is about building a pipeline. And, you know, we're very proud of what we're doing here.
Music to our ears. I mean, really, it's all about looking at the community and empowering the youth. Saudi Arabia is 70% of the population is under 25. We're talking about a very youthful population. And the thirst for knowledge and the thirst for experience is tremendous. And also, I think that there's a lot of people that are starting their own platforms and they need the guidance. They don't necessarily... There's practice and there's theory. Having that combination of guidance and knowing that that's available is tremendous. But moving on to Faisal. Faisal, do you think that there is maybe a struggle where local titles have, maybe international titles have more of an edge over local? Or do you feel like the credibility is actually even more there with the Arab community because it is a local concept?
Look, I welcome competition. In fact, I think people thrive when you put their backs against the wall and ask them to bring out the best. But it is also not an us versus them scenario. In fact, I will go back 8 years to when I first started the job and a conversation I had with Becky. And, you know, to my point, Becky was saying, you have no idea how important the work that you do is for us. Because when our researchers at CNN are looking for a story in the Middle East or in Saudi Arabia, indeed, we're looking to verify. And who better to go and verify than the newspaper of record for that country? Of course, this is a lot of responsibility on us because...
It's being adapted to various countries. So we're talking about France, we're talking about India, we're talking about how many Arab users?
So that is the idea. So when you take that and you say, well, hold on, I'm the newspaper of records. Why shouldn't I make it easier for people to be quoting us and us doing our job? So that's the idea, indeed, where we said, okay, we are already leading in English. How can we replicate that? So Arab News Japan, in Japanese, Arab News French, Arab News Pakistan, and hopefully other international editions. But the idea is you make it easier for people to access information, credible information, verified information, and tell our stories with our own sources and our own narratives. And in that sense, it does not become a competition. CNN is an international TV channel, and it does not compete in America, in its own backyard, with local TV networks. In the same way that CNN does not compete with Arab news in the region, nor, as ambitious as we are, we're not at a level where we're going to say we're going to become the world's leading TV network. In fact, our name is Arab News. So we need to stay loyal to our mission and do it at the best of our abilities.
I have to say that I think Arab News has reached definitely new heights in the sense where once the story is out, everyone knows about it. Prior to that, There was like conventional PR. And I think that now there's a kind of combination with digital and media. I think it's very important. But moving on
My
to
mother wrote for the Arab News in the
Really?
early 80s in Jeddah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we are turning 50 next year, so it's our 50th
mashallah.
Happy birthday.
anniversary. So remind me to invite you and your mother to our celebration.
We talked about seeing this region through the lens of this region. I also think it's really important that this region's media provides an opportunity to see global stories through this prism. Faisal, you did some work in Michigan for the US election, and you teamed up with, was it YouGov?
YouGov, yes, correct.
And did a poll on young Arab Americans in Michigan and how they were going to vote. Now, obviously, that was a very contentious state. It was absolutely in play. It ultimately went to Donald Trump. We did a lot of work on why that would be, and clearly the Gaza conflict front and center in the
But
minds
he
of
also
so
went
many.
to Michigan.
He also
He
went
was
to Michigan.
super
You're
smart.
absolutely right.
And she
yep.
didn't. And Kamala didn't.
Are you talking about
Point
me or
being-
Trump? Thank you. Yes.
That would have made all the difference.
That would have swung it.
But it was
Absolutely.
interesting because we were able to look at the work that Faisal did as an organization with assets on the ground, reported in Arab news, and we picked that up and looked at that sort of through this lens. So not just through the lens, and I did a lot of work
That's
with
amazing.
Arab
By
Americans.
association, Arab news
Yeah,
is kind
right.
of really holding the narrative. That's amazing.
I did a lot of work with Arab Americans in Michigan
Yeah.
and talked to a lot of members of the community about how they felt and why it was that they weren't endorsing Kamala, and why it was that some of them were actually going to vote for Trump, sort of holding their nose to a degree. I thought it was really interesting that Arab news were on the ground and providing that lens for and from here for an audience from here. We're always looking for local stories that can go global. And to your point, Malak, I just know everything in this region is, there's so many stories in this region. It's an amalgamation of people, it's an amalgamation of stories, just like there is an amalgamation of stories in Europe or in Latin America or in Asia. Don't treat this just as one block.
Yeah.
It's a huge block of just vibrant stories
And
out there.
layers.
And layers.
And
How do we
layers,
make
yeah.
those go global? You've got to be on the ground. You've got to have your teams on the ground. You've got to talk to people locally. You've got to get out onto those stories. Look, in the Gulf region, when I first got here, I will say that we were in a position, it was harder. We had to work harder to find local stories that were resonating globally. I'm talking about the Gulf very specifically, and you're right to point out that that's our lens to a degree here. Because we were talking about a lot of visions. We were locally, there was a lot of selling of visions, and there wasn't a lot of substantive, robust stories that we could talk about. I'm not in the business of selling a vision. I'm not in the Marcoms world.
Yeah.
I am in the world of journalism and storytelling. Since 2014, and I would say very specifically since COVID here, because there's a real pre-post-COVID world in the Gulf, the access to substantive, robust stories that we can tell rather than visions that we can sell are there for us. We just need to open our lens all the time. And then, we've obviously got buckets of news, conflict in this region is incredibly important to us.
The vision became reality,
But the vision,
actually.
absolutely.
Yeah,
But when we open our lens, there isn't just a region of conflict. There is a region of really substantive, rich stories to tell. And that is my job.
proper news source. 'Cause
And proper news,
now you have
yep.
TikTok and you have like all
Right.
these crazy platforms that are diluting and fake news as well. So it's nice to have a really reliable source that you can go to. And going back to what you said, Becky, the credibility is there because when you localize and when you think of the local brands, you think of the local perspective, it adds so much more. To me, this is what I mean by credibility. And what we look at. If I see something on TikTok, if I see something on YouTube, I think twice, But if I see something from you guys, I'm like, okay, this is a reliable source, But do you think, Malak, that Spotify and Applebean and all these podcast platforms are enough for us to kind of get our voices across? Because, it's a combination,
But
right?
I also think it's a question of time. I mean, you look at, for example, other regions of the world or ethnic groups. For example, the Hispanic community in the US. It took them a long time to get up front and center, but they're there. And they're at the forefront of everything that's happening in the national discourse. For us, I think we just have to keep going with what we're doing. We're on the right path. If we keep telling our stories, then I don't feel we need the approval of other people. We don't need a stamp of approval from anybody. We know what we're doing. We know what our stories are. Let me give you an example. So for me, my podcast, What I Did Next, looks at people's pivot points, as you know. And the byproduct that came out of this, when I was talking to people in comms, actually, they were saying to me, how do you distill what you're doing? And so I said, actually, we've ended up telling really positive stories of individuals from our region. But it's a byproduct. It wasn't what I intended to go out and do. And it's turned out to be an incredible role model in terms of what people want to hear. But it was a byproduct, you know. Positive stories from our region are few and far between. They are getting much more. There's many more of them. But as Becky said, when the attention of the world is on our region, on Gaza, on Lebanon, on Hezbollah, on Hamas, then, you know, we have a PR problem. But that is not our problem. Our problem is to keep telling our stories. And eventually that positivity will come through. People will see it. And as you were saying, when people come to the region, they see it for what it truly is. They get to interact with people. They work here. They attend conferences, and they see it for what it is.
What would you say is your most kind of important tool in media at the moment that you can get to the most people? Is it social media? Is it podcasting? Is it conventional media? What do you consume the most?
Personally?
What do you think is the most impactful?
I think for a show like mine, and I think it's a global phenomenon actually, podcasting began very much as an audio format, as you all know. Today, YouTube is massive. It's a regional thing. A lot of people in the Middle East consume their media visually. Saudi Arabia, as we know, is the biggest market for entertainment in the region. Then it's Egypt, and then following that is the UAE. And then you have smaller markets. But everyone still consumes video. It's video heavy. But it's a global phenomenon as well. So the podcasting industry globally is moving towards video. So we were very lucky. When we began our show, we were videoing everything from day one. So we have that product. So I still feel, and if you look at a channel like Spotify, they're putting a lot of emphasis on video. They've expanded their video content massively. So that's where things are going in terms of the industry.
Hatem, I think it's. I think there's, each to their own, as it were. I think all of these different platforms are, burgeoning at the moment. CNN, for example, CNN Global is a group of brands. For example, linear TV pillar, that if you are in the States and you have watched in the past, which is different from CNN International, is just one of those pillars. CNN as a news destination is the biggest global news destination. I think routinely registering 180 million unique monthly visitors. When I talk about that, I'm talking about digital, I'm talking about the platforms, the vodcasting platforms that we have. CNN YouTube, for example, has 16 million followers. Our breaking news Twitter site has 60 million viewers. But then there's TikTok, and then there's Instagram, and then there's a show that I do, both on linear and for streamed TV these days. I think my point in this is, I think there's a real value in pod and vodcasting these days. And I think, but again, it's different territories. What the challenge for us, and this is what we talk about in Academy a lot, is how you take the content you are creating and carve that up across platforms.
Absolutely.
Because, something that we will do for the show isn't necessarily going to resonate on a vertical video.
It's a different
platform.
demographic as well. Yeah.
It's a different demographic. It may not resonate as well, or we'll have to do something different with it across a digital print piece. Something may resonate better on YouTube. For example, we interviewed Mo Salah about 6 or 7 years ago now when he first went to Liverpool. That did so well on YouTube because, you know, we understand who's watching YouTube, how people are consuming CNN on YouTube.
But to be fair, I think they would consume...
They would have consumed that anyway.
He is so inspirational.
Yes, yeah.
He's phenomenal.
And again, you know,
Really
I tell you why we got the interview with Mo Salah that nobody else got or has got since, is because Mo is Egyptian, he's from the region, he was, you know, at Liverpool, he's got a story to tell behind
ultimate
that.
success
He
story.
watched the show, he understood that we do stories, you know, global stories with a regional lens, and he wanted to come on the show, which I was very grateful for, of course. But yeah, I mean, my point is, it did really well on YouTube because we know that that's a hugely consumed platform for us these days, almost ignored over the sort of, you know, over 5, 6, 7 years ago. But it's suddenly become really. But it's how we're all content creators. We're all content creators. But how do we make that content
Even as
best
entrepreneurs,
resonate?
it's
But
essential.
fundamentally
Yes.
as well, people's attention span has gone...
Absolutely.
Has lowered.
Yeah.
So people want to consume these bite-sized pieces of content.
But there is also
there's
also
longer.
room for that long form
We
stuff as well,
produce
right?
long and
Yeah.
short and TikTok and, you know, quick and fun, and you have to be nimble now. You can't be strict and say this is how I do it. You've got to be moving with, you know, in every 6 months there's a new thing. And
How do I best tell my story?
Yeah.
Which platform am I going to use to tell that story on? And who's watching? Who's consuming? And, you know, that's what's really important to us going forward, to all of us here, yeah?
I mean, working with luxury brands, I have an agency that is consulting. We create bridges between international and local brands. And now international brands are really starting to take the local market much more seriously.
Yeah.
Before, it was just kind of like syndicate whatever we have and create it. Now it's all about creating authentic content that is on the ground.
Absolutely.
Faisal, what do you think about this movement that's happening? Do you think that we have the chops to create content locally that will resonate internationally, or we still have a long way to go?
No, on the contrary, I think we don't give enough credit to the curiosity of the rest of the world. We start from the wrong starting point, as if we are not relevant to the world. In fact, we are the most relevant, probably one of the most relevant
example.
regions.
I would say the most relevant part of the world
Absolutely.
today
Yeah.
in 2024.
But we have
you
been
go.
forever, actually.
Right.
But-
we are the center.
So-
you know,
most definitely in 2024.
For
Yeah,
sure.
Well,
For
there
sure.
was,
thousands
and
of
I'll give you a
Yeah,
few,
yeah,
you know, to qualify that, I'll give you a few reasons. You know, Saudi Arabia is the custodians of the two holy mosques for Islam. We're talking billions of people around the world. It's the crossroad. The Gulf, at least, is the crosswords of trade. We're talking about a way to connect East and West. Ancient civilizations such as Egypt. I mean, do you honestly think that if a piece of hieroglyphics was discovered now in Egypt, it wouldn't be a front page story all the way from Tokyo, to Toronto?
It still is,
It is. So we tend to have a tendency to undermine ourselves, unfortunately. It is true that we didn't have the tools or didn't pay enough attention to develop those tools to help people understand our region, but that's strongly changing. On the point,
We have a stronger, you know, we discussed this, we have a much stronger sense of identity when we know our heritage and our culture, whatever heritage.
no, absolutely. And to that point, you, for a long period of time, you had more experts coming from abroad. When we talk about archaeologists and anthropologists who were more interested in our region than we were. Now, again, given the reforms and the awakening that's been happening in the region, you now see the springing up of culture commissions, whether it's in handcrafts, whether it's in film, whether it's in music, whether it's in traditional art forms. So we are seeing a revival and an awakening on that front. So on that note, I'm optimistic that we will be not only be able to tell our stories better, but enable others who are genuinely interested, and as I said, there's no reason for them not to be interested, to come and see with their own eyes what a fascinating part of the world we live in.
It's very inspiring to hear that, and we're all very much looking forward to seeing more milestones with the Arab News. Malak, your process of curating topics that will resonate locally and internationally, personalities, what's your process?
So it's become, I sort of fine-tuned it as I went along.
Yeah.
My process is quite simple. I want to get as many voices from the region as I can, as many industries as I can as well. So in fact, we have been seasonal. So we'd had 2 seasons a year. And starting in January, we're going to be a continuous show.
Good.
Congratulations.
So I think it's going to be a bit more interesting and just smoother.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. We curate based on industries, but the fundamental bottom line is the story interesting? Does that person know how to communicate it well? Are they excited about their journey? And can the audience learn something from them?
Okay.
So that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, fantastic. Becky, more on CNN Academy. When are we going to have it in Saudi?
Listen, we're 4 years in, and we are looking at all the opportunities that. So we are looking at opportunities everywhere at the moment, and I would love to ensure that Academy gets an opportunity to work with young Saudis. I'd love that.
And Egypt.
And Egypt. Now, listen,
Come to Egypt.
we are based here, but we will go anywhere where we find an opportunity. I mean, it's.
There's a plethora of creatives that don't know where to take their content. And I think that this is kind of spot on, having that vision and knowing that there is a place that you can go to
And listen,
further.
we don't need to bring Academy to Egypt or Saudi to extend the opportunity. So
right.
I would love to be in Saudi. I'd love to be in Egypt. I'd love to be all around the region. I'd also like to ensure that we were getting as many youngsters from the region here to Academy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, we can't wait.
Good.
Faisal, what do you think is the future of Arab media, considering how far you've come now? Where is it heading? Obviously, the digital transformation with Arab News is tremendous, and the impact it's had on people who were on Arab News as well. But where do you see it heading?
Are you asking about Arab News in specific or Arab media in general?
Arab News in specific. Yeah.
Well, as I said, we celebrate our 50th anniversary next year, and whilst many people would have a midlife crisis, I couldn't be any more excited or enthusiastic, particularly for the reason that you've described. Look, when I took the helm about 8 years ago, we had very Arab News specific problems, legacy problems, industry within Saudi Arabia problems. All of that has been resolved. I think, thank you for all the praise that you've given Arab News. We don't take any of it for granted. We firmly believe that we are as good as our last story, and everything we've built can go if we blink for only once.
Yeah.
However, the biggest achievement is we got the brand today to share the same problem that news brands share everywhere in the world, which is, what do you do with artificial intelligence? What do you do with the digital pressure that you have, which is you need to spend a lot of money on content, but the returns aren't where they should be, as I'm talking about the returns of investment. So I think our challenge will be to sit down together with the likes of CNN, with the likes of our colleagues in Britain and around the world, and be part of this exciting conversation regarding what is the future of newscasting or news telling. Because let me tell you one thing, Hatem, and I want to end on that note. Many people are pessimistic about the future of journalism. Many think that our jobs are at stake. Well, let me tell you something. At a time where fake news couldn't be manufactured any easier or spread any faster, do you really think it's the time for us to have less journalists or more?
Absolutely.
Essentially, our job is to verify and confirm to people that this is accurate. So with everything that's going around, I think the future is bright for people in our profession.
Absolutely. Malak, do you think that the future of journalism will disintegrate, or do you think that it's heading somewhere else?
No, I agree with Faisal, actually. I think that more and more you're going to turn to trusted sources.
Yeah.
There is so much out there that is unverified, that is uncertain, that's twisting things, and you go to trusted sources. And I think that podcasts will not fill that gap. So that's not the role of podcasting or audio. That's more of an entertainment format. But for trusted news, like Becky was saying, I mean, I have a whole list of media outlets that are on my Twitter account or that I subscribe to or whatever, and breaking news just hits my phone, and I know that if it's on that channel, then I will believe it.
Yeah.
So it's very important to maintain the journalism as an industry.
And
It's
the
essential.
integrity and the
Absolutely.
values, which
Absolutely.
somehow are
And
all.
that's where we start with CNN Academy.
Yep.
It is about the integrity of the brand. It is a trusted source. It is about teaching those skills of verification. Open source investigative work is new and different because there are so many sort of tools out there, and our students get an opportunity to work with the teams who are invested in OSINT work now. But it is about truth telling. Mm-hmm. These days I think there are big discussions about what is truth. We talk about facts first. There are discussions around your facts might be different from my facts, and then your truth is based on your facts. Look,
Fact is fact.
fact is fact, correct. And the toolkit that we are providing for our students in doing a deep dive into CNN's hub is through 40 years of experience at CNN in ensuring that we remain authentic and a trusted source. And I think our success here in region, and I think you made this point a little earlier, Faisal, is that we are a trusted source. I have been here for more than a decade now. The Bureau has been here for 15 years. CNN Arabic, our Arabic services, online Arabic service has been in Dubai since 2002, so that's 22 years. And I can tell you, I have never been asked to do a story, nor told to do a story, nor asked to step away from a story, or told to step away from a story. Never. I think the understanding is that we bring a lot of authenticity to this region, and rightly so. And the academy, being here in Abu Dhabi, based in Abu Dhabi, giving an opportunity for youngsters around this region to come and sort of acquire that skill set in journalism and storytelling, I think is really important.
I remember I saw one of your interviews, and you mentioned that you didn't want to get into broadcasting, and you wanted to pursue.
I think I was talking to you about that. I went to ASU in the States, Arizona State University, and they had a broadcast sort of element to the course that I was doing.
You didn't think it was serious.
I didn't think it was serious.
Yeah.
I wanted to do print. I started on the Arizona Republic and the Phoenix Business Journal. I actually started in business news, and you're right, Bloomberg and then CNBC before I joined CNN. But I just thought it was silly. I just didn't think it was deep enough. I got a real opportunity in business news writing, print journalism to do these really sort of deep dives, these feature pieces.
But at the time, print was king.
Print was king.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we've learned, over the years to ensure that the broadcast sort of element of the work that we do
I began
is
in
robust.
print as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, Faisal.
Sorry, Faisal.
Funny enough, I just want to say, wait.
Believe me.
I started in television and ended in print. And that's a true story.
And print is king. I mean, print has a real place.
Future television in Lebanon.
وبعدين
بعدين الحياة
That's
and then
right.
الشرق الأوسط. So I started in television and then
Yeah, and just going back to Becky and then coming back to you, I think also what would resonate with me is you clarified that you need to have a passion for what you do. You have to, before specializing in journalism, know what your craft is, learn it, and then kind of pursue journalism before.
Yeah, I'd done economics at university, and I was trying to work out what I would do. I actually loved economics. I read John Maynard Keynes was underneath my bed, Mum said, when I don't remember this, but 13, 14, I used to, for some reason, I just sort of decided that economics was my kind of gig, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I always wanted to be in storytelling, and it was sort of the nascent years of business news. You know, I mean, obviously there have been newsletters and business news and financial information that have been there for as long as the world of finance has been around. But sort of, the New York Times had recently, just in the early 90s, had launched its sort of business section. And I was seeing that in a lot of print. And I just wanted to do something with my business and finance background. And I specialized in finance and business journalism when I did my master's in Arizona, and I loved it. But I found it was really important to have a sweet spot, bespoke beat when I started in journalism, and then I became more of a sort of generalist as I went through my career at CNN. But I think I think we're back to as a lot of news is going behind subscription walls. I think we are absolutely in an era where bespoke journalism is king. We are there has to be value added. If somebody's going to pay for journalism, because it's all been free for so long, somebody's going to pay for it and we're putting it behind a subscription wall, you better be good. You better be providing some value. Be that on, AI and tech, be that on health, be that on travel and tourism, be that in fashion. We used to go out and buy Vogue, right? There's a reason why we went and bought it, or why we go behind a subscription wall. You've got to know your stuff.
But my worry with this idea is that the new generation don't view it in the same way, and they don't look at news like we look at news.
The way it's consumed.
The way it's consumed. So it's much more of a pull rather than a push.
Yeah.
So they will go on to TikTok, and if they see something in front of them, then they'll watch it, but they won't go and find what they need to find. So it's a different. I worry that it's going to be evolving in the wrong way. To meet that demand.
I had a 16-year-old doing some work experience here just yesterday, and I picked up the hard copy of the FT that I get delivered every day.
They didn't know what it was.
And I said, do you know what this is? I said, have you ever read a newspaper? And he said no.
Yeah.
And I said, do you even know how to fold a broadsheet? And he didn't. So I showed him. It was almost, I said, I'm going to be like a magician now.
Absolutely.
And I folded this broadsheet, which I'd had to learn to do because I was commuted on the train to work and back every day. And you can't knock somebody in the face with this. But my point was, my point was, look at what I'm doing. Here's a headline. There are 7 stories plus a news digest on this front page. So already I counted them up. I had 16 stories on the front of the FT. Now, the FT had decided those were stories that might resonate with me as a consumer of the FT, but they did. I had 16 opportunities on the front page, and then as I went through, another, I think we counted 25 or 30 more stories. If I only go, if I am pushed to certain content by the algorithm that has learned or is telling me what I'm interested in, I have no opportunity to know outside of the headline,
navigate elsewhere,
where I'm going, and that really worries me.
Really
very one-sided.
It really worries me
That's
as well.
true,
Yeah.
But I just want to continue on passions. So with Becky, she followed her passion, and then her passion actually gave her even more ignition to be able to pursue something else that she wanted. What was your passion when you started?
My passion has always been journalism since I was a kid. And since we're both from Saudi Arabia and from Jeddah, you'd remember in the 80s, pre-satellite and pre-internet, there was not much to do.
Egypt, when you move the
in the summer only, you would get Egypt.
we were like, Malak.
Fix the antenna. If you fix the antenna, you could see Egyptian television. So my hobby was to go down with my father to his office and play with the typewriter, the paper, the glue, and the photocopying machine. and scissors and I mean,
Very old school.
luckily copyright issues weren't very at the surface. At the top, I think I would have infringed quite a lot by copying from other newspapers and producing my own magazines. But that's how it started.
That's really cute, actually.
And yes, it is cute. However, I could argue that I've been a journalist all my life. That hobby or fun project or summer project turned into a profession, which I've been in all my life. And I know it sounds very cliche to say, but once you find something that you're passionate about, then you never have to work another day in your life. It does not feel like work. Of course, it's very good for my employers because I put in more hours than I should, and I put in a lot more effort than I should. But you are very lucky if you work in a job or an industry that you genuinely do care about.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you guys later, but I made a major shift. But it's all related. It's all interrelated, and one passion can lead to the next one, and it makes you realize that. What was the passion, Malak?
So for me, my journey was slightly less linear, I think, than the majority of you. But I began as a journalist in London. I worked for Punch magazine, which is a satirical magazine, and then I worked for the Daily Mail. So quite different publications.
Never heard them before.
No. But actually, at Punch, I was doing interviews. So I was doing interviews with celebrities.
MashaAllah.
So that was how, in a way, it's come full circle in a way for me. But I had breaks along the way. I had a family. I stopped work for a little bit. Then I went back to university, actually, as a mature student. And in fact, what was funny is that the professors were my age. And then the students were the age of my children. So it was all a bit odd. But that actually led me to podcasting. For the simple reason that I was commuting in Cairo, and as you know, the traffic in Cairo is bad, so I would listen to podcasts, and I said, well, this is a medium that I can do. It blends my journalism with...
And very well, too.
Thank you. And so it just came as a natural fit. And so in a way, my passion came full circle. So yeah, that's how it happened.
I have the signature questions. We're going to be closing. I hope you don't mind. But, you know, just to let you know, I mean, for me, I started in fashion, and then I decided to go into empowering creatives. So I started an agency called Authenticite, which is Asala in Arabic. It means authentic, finding the authentic voice. And what we do is we want to really kind of create a bridge between local and international brands and give local creators a voice. It could be anything. It could be entrepreneurship, it could be fashion, it could be art. The sky's the limit. You guys have supported me a lot. Thank you very much over the years, and so have you. But the question is, what is authenticity to you, Becky?
I think authenticity is just about ensuring that you reveal how rich whatever it is that you are talking about.
Your essence.
So I think authenticity is about the essence and richness of whatever it is that you're talking about.
Okay, I like that. Faisal?
Be yourself. Everybody else is taken. So, and you have no idea. I mean, and I speak as a journalist who, for most of my career, has had to sit with a lot of people, and you can smell directly who's being themselves and who's putting on a mask. And you don't want to be in the same room or friends or close to somebody who's just putting on a mask, because you can tell. What you want is the person who is themselves.
Yeah.
Be it in a relationship, be it at work, be it in any contest. There is nothing like being authentic.
Absolutely.
I think it's also a question of being true to your roots. I think that has, for me, that has a big part to play. And I think it's a very personal journey. I am Egyptian, but I spent most of my life outside of Egypt. So for me, it's a mix. I'm not one or the other. I'm a blend. And I think that informs my perspective on a lot of things. And I think that a lot of people in the Arab world are like that. There is this blend of cultures, blend of nationalities, And I think that that makes for an incredibly rich tapestry, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It unites us.
Yeah.
And it creates this sense of synergy and nostalgia that brings us all together. And it could be any culture. It could be Egyptian culture, it could be Saudi culture, it could be,
Yeah.
you know, the whole concept about heritage is not just about saying I am, it's about embracing and being inclusive. And to us, this is what Gems of Arabia is about. It's about celebrating cultures, bridging cultures. But then also we bridge generations, you know, perspectives are very different. Of course, you know, my 20s, I wouldn't know what you're talking about, but, you know. But thank you all so much for being part of this.
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Malak, for flying over.
Thank you.
Faisal, really, really grateful that you came. Thank you. And Becky, I'm at a loss for words.
Hatem, stay real, man.
Thank you.
Stay real.
Stay authentic.
Stay
authentic.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you don't
Okay.
mind, we're gonna do some, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Do some Q&A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you ladies have any questions.
My name is Rana Afifi. I'm Egyptian, but I'm born and raised in the UAE. And I believe that with every upbringing generation, there's always a different light shed on the same topics that we talk on and about for years. And youth, they always bring new ideas to the table. But there's still fear of change and there's still fear of taking risk. And I fear myself as a young journalist that by the time we adapt, I'm not youthful anymore, you know, between air quotes. And how do you think we can fill in this gap? Because we live in a very rapid environment and we don't have the luxury of time to waste anymore like we used to.
You have social media, you have selected platforms, and you also have a voice. You can create your own narrative. Don't let the noise affect you. Continue what you were doing. Work hard at it, and you will achieve it. I went from being a fashion designer to kind of starting my own platform, and alhamdulillah, you know, brands are following suit. I'm working with, you know, ministries. My voice is reaching. It doesn't happen overnight, but don't let it discourage you. You know, keep your the fire and the enthusiasm there.
I think also don't be in such a rush. You know, there's a generation there who are in such a rush. I genuinely believe if you are on a path, just listen to what Hatem said. If you're on a path, stick to it. You're working with us here at CNN at the moment. It's wonderful to have you. You're bringing so much to the table, and I know that you're learning so much, and I know that you're in a massive rush. You know, I would expect people who come, we give an opportunity to at CNN to stick around with us and spend some time with us. Understand there's some experience here, and don't be in such a rush to ensure that you're ahead of the game the whole time, that you miss out on the experience that's out there.
Yeah, be present.
You know? Be present rather than, exactly.
Yeah. I also think that there's something to be said for honing your skills, because without that toolkit, whatever's going to come your way, you won't have the ability to deal with it. Whatever's going to come your way is going to come your way anyway. And you're going to be hit with thousands of things over the next decades. And it's going to be faster and speedier and all of that. But with that toolkit, you can deal with it.
Block the noise and keep the passion.
Hey. Good question.
On this side?
Two on this side, yep.
Good morning, guys.
Hi.
Can you emphasize more on the media landscape in Saudi Arabia and how it has evolved over the years? Additionally, are there any exciting concepts that the industry has yet to explore?
So actually, you might be surprised to hear this, but the media industry in Saudi Arabia has always been very progressive in the sense that we were at the cutting edge of the major media developments across the region. And I'll give you a few examples. But what I want to say is the current dip or the current down is not the norm, it's the exception. Fact, the leading pan-Arab newspaper, the first pan-Arab newspaper to be based in London, Al-Sharq Al-Awsat, in the 80s was the first ever newspaper in the world to publish via satellite over 4 continents. And in fact, you had a delegation come from the Asahi Shimbun in Japan, and we all know how technologically advanced Japan was in the 80s, to come and see this technology that the Saudis have pioneered to be able to print newspapers around the globe. The first Pan-Arab international satellite channel, MBC, was also conceived in London in '91 before it moved here and now eventually to Saudi Arabia. The first pay-per-view news channel was a collaboration between BBC World and Orbit, which for this generation is known as the predecessor of OSN. Of course, that project didn't last long. Then there was a dip. Then the Qataris came up with Al Jazeera as the equivalent of CNN International, 24 hours news. A few years after that, we went back into the race with Al Arabiya. I think we managed to catch up very quickly. In 2008, Al Arabiya, not Al Jazeera, became the first ever international news channel in the world to get an exclusive first interview with then President Barack Obama. We sort of lost the... and let's not forget in 2001, the first Arab newspaper online was Ilaf, established by the legendary former editor-in-chief of Sharq al-Awsat, Uthman al-Umair. We missed the plot a little bit when it came to social media, but I think with the reforms that are going on now and the huge collaboration between the media ministry and the artificial intelligence bodies, we are looking for the next big thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if the next big thing in the media sphere comes from Saudi Arabia.
It's so validating to hear all of your thoughts. I am an editor-in-chief of a student-run newspaper in Abu Dhabi, and this discourse around the Western gaze on freedom of speech is something that I engage with a lot. So it's very validating to hear all of you. I have 2 questions. I'll keep them brief and objective. One is for you, Hatem and Malak. I'm curious about your audience analytics. Who is the demographic? What is the demographic that's consuming your content most? And are you satisfied with that? Are you reaching your target audience? And my second question is to you, Becky and Faisal. We're talking about trust and integrity, both of which are very loaded ideas. One manipulated image in the newsroom and your credibility is at stake. What are practical practices of trust building that are happening in the newsroom? Give me some insight, please.
Shall I start? Yes, please. So in terms of demographics, podcasting is an industry that we don't have yet very deep numbers on. So, and that's really a worldwide thing, actually. In terms of my show, I'm pretty much split male-female. And my listenership and viewership correspond to the biggest media markets in the region. So we're consumed the most in Saudi, Egypt, UAE. But because my content is firstly in English, not in Arabic, I have a much wider reach. So I'm international on a much smaller scale, but I have reach in Australia, which is fascinating, in the UK and in the US, the English-speaking lands, basically. More than that, I can't help you because we just don't have the information. And in fact, it's an area that needs to be much more developed. And the podcasting industry is very conscious of the fact that we need to create agencies that can give us some information, give us some numbers.
Because it's tough to monetize at the moment.
It's tough to monetize. Yeah. It's impossible to monetize. But more than that, we don't know more than that, you know. We can know demographics, we can know a bit about it, but we have much more information regarding our social media reach. Because in a way, the way we approach the industry is you have your product, which is audio and video, that has an audience, but you also have a subset, which is social media, and it's its own beast. So I have an audience online that never consume the show, either listening to it or watching it, but they know about every guest and they know all about that. So those numbers are there.
Attention span also, no?
Well, I don't know. I mean, podcasting is still.
You just condense it and you give it to them.
Yeah, that's what we do. That's what we
Really
do.
funny.
Yeah.
Who actually listened? Did anybody in this room listen to the entire Joe Rogan Donald Trump podcast the other day?
I thought you were going to ask if they listened to our show.
Start there probably. But it was interesting. It was an exercise for me because this is as a journalist reporting on that. I had initially thought, God, I haven't got time to listen to those 3 hours. So I'll consume it.
Absolutely.
As, in the way that CNN has chopped it up for social media. And then I thought, you know what, let me think about this from a sort of consumer's point of view. There will be, a sense that we will have cut that up at CNN for, the way that we would want that to be consumed, with a bias, for example. There will be that assumption out there. Whether or not it's true is beside the point. So I did listen to 3 hours of it.
Did you?
It was such an interesting exercise to remind myself that social media is not the way that we should be consuming our news in its entirety.
One-sided.
And it's literally hitting the cutting room floor type stuff, right? It's like somebody has decided to take this out. It's the gotcha moment. It's the out of context moment. And I think across the US election campaign, there was a lot of debate about taking stuff out of context. And I think there was a lot of there was a lot of truth in that to a degree. And I think that happens a lot, So people think they're consuming you. And you're happy because at least you're getting some numbers on it. And right.
It's very detrimental because you're trying to portray the full person.
Yeah.
You're interviewing someone. You want to get their 360.
Yeah.
And you're not getting it.
Yeah.
It's like if you're looking at it online.
Yeah.
You're just not.
People think they watch CNN. On our Gaza coverage, people have decided where they're going to come from on that. They think they're watching CNN. But if I get complaints from Israelis about our coverage, that's because they have consumed what we've done in social media. They haven't watched my show, I can tell you that. I can tell you that much for nothing.
Yeah.
And a Palestinian who had huge complaints at periods of time about our coverage has not consumed our coverage. Because if they had, they would understand that there was content, on both sides of that. And we, and so it was a real problem. So to your point about, how we ensure trust, and this is tough. This is tough because we can ensure that, through the OSINT teams, for example, and I think you'll do some, you'll have done some work with those teams on in Academy through our verification, tools, ensuring that we go for at least two sources. Single source approval is really quite rare at CNN. I can get single source approval on a very, very, very good source that I will have in this region, who I've built up a relationship with over years now, and I can get single source approval for that. But it is the exception that proves the rule that we only get single source approval.
And that's an American style of journalism.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, and people will say, well, who are your sources? You might have two biased sources. Look, we do our jobs as journalists, and we're a fourth estate, don't forget. I mean, journalism in the true sense of the word is the fourth estate set up to ensure accountability from the other three estates, right? And so that's very different from, the world of, storytelling in Marcoms or across, there is, I mean, I say we're all storytellers. All journalists are storytellers, but not all storytellers are journalists, right? I mean, and that's really, really important. And so when you come to us at Academy, you are learning to be storytellers and journalists. And so to that point, I think, it's the OSINT teams, it's the new tools that we have, open source tools that we have to help us, verify facts.
Upskilling as well.
Upskilling, absolutely. Absolutely. That's 100%.
But answering your question, basically, I come from a fashion background, so thank God for Instagram. You know, I was able to build a community. I had 3 boutiques in Saudi, Jeddah, Riyadh, Khobar. And at the same time, from there, the community started being built. I thought, you know what? Why don't I start creating a consultancy agency? So IFRA, which is an international, it's an institution in Saudi, a cultural institution. Pioneers in cinema, pioneers in everything, in fashion, asked me to come and curate an exhibition for them. And I'm like, okay, why me? I'm a designer. And I realized you have an eye. So from there, I realized that my eye was to kind of bring creatives together. And from there, it kind of translated into writing.
Where were these people from?
Predominantly Saudi, yeah. But with GemsOfArabia, we're inclusive. There's usually a conversation. Someone who could be from the MENA, could be from Saudi. There isn't any kind of like, you know, specific. It just has to be Saudi, but it's Saudi-centric. Through my content, I've noticed that there's a lot of cringy campaigns that are coming from international brands coming into the region, wanting to create something local that makes no sense to us. So I did all my content myself, and from there I fell in love with content. And I realized that you can build a community through content, and at the same time you can work with brands. Most of my GemsOfArabia episodes are actually sponsored. So I work with Valentino, with Boucheron, with Harrods. I've had a 1-year relationship with Harrods. They've been very supportive. We covered Middle East. Went to Balad and Jeddah. We filmed in London, reaching out to the community, all through a podcast. So just to show you that there are certain ways of monetizing. Obviously, the fact that I'm a consultancy agency, I'm in marketing, that helps me pitch and approach brands. I'm a fashion background. But there's so many different ways of utilizing your content and monetizing it. And alhamdulillah, I've been very lucky. Now I'm going to film with Marley. Marley is a jewelry brand, you know. And it's tapping into areas that are different. We try to get away from the fluff of the whole just kind of influencery side. And keep the substance there. That's my advice. And when you tap into a brand, you get to go collaborate. And now doing those collaborations really you get to reach more people through your audience. So when you have collaborations, this whole new movement now changes your demographic and your reach. So normally we have London is very much part of our Saudi, of course. Jeddah, predominantly, since I'm a Jeddah boy. Riyadh is starting, Abu Dhabi, Dubai. We have a lot of North Africans, because since I used to design a lot of traditional garments for what was loved by North Africans, and the US.
I'm so pleased that you said the fluff of influencers. Because influencers, by the way, are not journalists. And they are not storytellers.
No,
absolutely.
So, you know, and I think we are I think we're moving beyond. And again, you know, to our point about don't be in too much of a rush, because 3 years ago, you might have just said, I need to get out there, I need to do what the influencers are doing, they're the ones who are resonating. I think we're going to find there's going to be a different world
And there's
out
a
there.
backlash happening.
Yeah,
already.
absolutely.
It's visible.
We need proper storytelling.
You are authentic because you are brilliant at what you do. You're passionate about what you do. You've got a background. You know, you've got a bespoke interest in what you do. You're a professional.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for being part of this GemsOfArabia podcast. Thank you, Becky, for hosting us.
It's been an absolute joy.
And I salute you on the CNN Academy. We look forward to seeing what's in store for Saudi soon.
Of course.
Malak, thank you so much for coming to Abu Dhabi for this podcast.
you.
And Faisal, I appreciate your long trip. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.